The new kid on Zanari Street *. The transport ship landed with a soft thud on Zanari Street, a quiet place on the alien colony of Arvuna. The houses were tall, made of glowing crystal and smooth stone. Trees with silver leaves danced in the warm wind. Alien mothers walked with their children, and almost every home had only one adult female, no father in sight. When the doors of the ship opened, a human boy stepped out. His name was Jace. He looked young, maybe 19, with short brown hair, soft eyes, and a backpack that seemed too big for his frame. He stretched his arms and looked around, not afraid, just curious. A few alien mothers paused and stared. They had never seen a human that close before. Some whispered to each other, thinking he was weak or soft. Others laughed, calling him Earth Pup. But one alien mother, the widow of House 14, stared a little longer. Jace walked to the community desk. A tall alien male handed him a keycard and said, "You've been assigned to Unit 17. It's small, but safe. Don't disturb the neighbors, especially the widows." Jace smiled and nodded. "Thank you." He found his home quickly. It was simple, a cube-shaped pod with one window and a small bed. As he unpacked, he noticed something strange. His window faced directly toward House 14 and the alien mother. Across the street kept glancing at him. That night, something strange happened. A loud humming sound came from House 14. Like laughter mixed with music, lights blinked, and the air shimmered around the windows. It lasted for hours, then silence. The next morning, the alien widow walked outside glowing. Her skin shimmered and her steps were light. She smiled at everyone, even the grumpy old lady next door. The other alien moms noticed. Their eyes followed her as she passed Jace's unit and gave him a nod. By noon, 3 alien mothers visited Jace's home. They came with excuses. One said her water system was broken. Another said her child wanted help with homework. The third just brought him a fruit basket and stared at his face without blinking. Jace helped them all. He fixed the water, explained the homework, and accepted the fruit. But he never said anything strange or touched them in a bad way. He just smiled, listened, and made them feel seen. That evening, more lights flickered around the street, this time from 2 houses. The air smelled sweet, like flowers in bloom. The next morning, both those alien mothers had the same glow as the widow from House 14. Something was happening, something the other neighbors couldn't understand. One of the alien fathers, who came only on weekends, noticed the change. His former partner now laughed often, smiled more. She even ignored his messages. He watched from a distance and saw Jace watering his plants, humming the song from Earth. The father narrowed his eyes and called for a neighborhood meeting. Meanwhile, Jace continued his routine. He visited the market, helped kids cross the street, and offered to carry heavy boxes for the elderly. Every action was kind, every word respectful, but still, alien mothers started walking differently when they passed his home. Some began wearing brighter robes, fixing their hair, and standing near their balconies when Jace walked by. A few started arguing about who had spoken to him last. The atmosphere changed from calm to electric. The alien father who had raised the complaint watched in disbelief as his own ex-partner greeted Jace with fresh bread. She laughed like she hadn't in years, and for a moment, the father looked confused. Was she really happy? Later that night, security drones flew low over the neighborhood, scanning for illegal tech or pheromone drugs. Nothing was found. No one could explain why so many alien mothers were smiling again, why they were hosting community meals and dancing at night. Jace didn't seem to notice the attention. Or maybe he did but didn't care. He was just being himself. And that self was making the whole neighborhood feel something they hadn't felt in years. Joy. The next morning, a new visit arrived, a young alien widow with 4 children. She was assigned the house beside Jace. The minute she saw him helping one of the older moms with groceries, she blushed and looked away. The cycle was beginning again, and on Zanari Street, nothing would ever be the same again. *. The widows Glow, asterisk. The sun rose slow on Zanari Street, but something had already changed. The air felt warmer, the colors brighter, and the mood lighter. Alien mothers who once walked alone now chatted in small groups, giggling softly like schoolgirls. And at the center of it all was the human student Jace. He didn't do anything dramatic. He wasn't rich, didn't carry weapons, and didn't look like a warrior, but his presence had started something the neighborhood had never seen before. A quiet revolution. The widow of House 14, once withdrawn and cold, now walked each morning like she floated. Her skin sparkled like dew, and her eyes glowed with content. She began teaching art again at the local learning pod. Her students whispered, "Miss Kalari is smiling again." Soon more alien mothers followed. They began sending coded messages to each other, small notes and coms filled with questions like, "Have you spoken to the human? Did he visit your home yet? What did he say to you?" One by one, they began inviting him over. The reasons were silly at first. One said her garden was wilting and needed Earth-style care. Another asked him to help lift a broken skylamp. A third simply left her front door open, hoping he'd stop by. Jace never refused help. But he never flirted either. He just listened, helped, and left each home better than it was before. And with every visit, the glow spread. The mothers walked taller, spoke softer, and smiled longer. Soon, it wasn't just the mothers, their children began doing better in school, drawing pictures of Earth and writing essays titled, "What Jace Taught My Mom." Some wrote songs, others wrote thank you letters, and one brave child even asked, "Can Jace be our new dad?" The alien fathers, most of whom were off-world workers, noticed the changes during their weekly holocalls. Their ex-partners had stopped answering, or cut the calls short. Some even canceled visits, saying, "The children are doing fine now." It didn't take long for the whispers to reach the neighborhood fathers' council. The eldest father, Yunrak, called a private meeting. They gathered in the old decision hall, their faces grim, their voices low. "The human is interfering with household bonds," said one. "He's not even doing anything." Another replied, "That's what's terrifying." The council agreed on a plan. They would send one of their own, Elder Ron, a respected male, with a strong mind, to visit the boy, not as a threat, but as a test, to see what exactly this human was doing that no one else could match. Ran visited on a cool afternoon. Jace was helping a child fix a broken hover toy. The boy thanked him with a tight hug, and Jace smiled warmly. Ron watched from a distance, arms crossed, then stepped forward. "You're very active in this neighborhood," Ron said with a firm voice. "I just help where I can," Jace replied, wiping his hands on a towel. "You seem to make the women different," Ron added, unsure of how to describe the shift. Jace looked him in the eyes and said, "They were never broken. They were just tired of being invisible." Ron didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said quietly, "Do you know what you're doing?" Jace shrugged. "I talk to them, I listen, I respect them. Maybe they're not used to that." The next day, Ron submitted a silent report to the council. He simply wrote, "He is not a threat. He is a reminder." But the story didn't stop there. That same evening, one of the most high-status alien mothers in the city, Lady Envarin, personally invited Jace to her estate. She was known for her cold heart and sharp tongue. Rumors said no male, alien or otherwise, had ever pleased her mind or spirit. Jace arrived with no gifts, no armor, and no plan, just a plate of hand-baked Earth cookies. The servants laughed behind curtains, but Envarin took one bite, blinked twice, and invited him inside. They talked for hours, not about war or science, but about painting, loss, and the loneliness of long nights. When he left, her hands trembled and her eyes were damp. She stood on her balcony for the first time in years, whispering into the wind. The next morning, Lady Envarin hosted a neighborhood gathering. With Jace as the honored guest, she called him a student of the heart, and thanked him for reminding her that stillness was not strength, and silence was not peace. By now, Half the colony was watching Zanari Street. Other communities began asking for Jace to visit. Offers came in schools, counseling centers, even a marriage proposal from a royal widow with twins. But Jace stayed rooted, walking Zanari Street each morning like it was sacred ground. The alien moms kept glowing, the children kept laughing, and the fathers kept watching. And in one quiet home at the end of the street, a new mother whispered to her friend, "He didn't even touch me, but I haven't slept this peacefully in years." The council's dilemma, the mood on Zanari Street had shifted again. It was no longer quiet admiration or secret glances. Now it was full devotion. Alien mothers organized cleaning shifts for Jace's unit. One brought him fresh towels every 2 days, another one built a flower ring around his door. But something was boiling underneath all the smiles. Not everyone was happy. The alien father's council, once quiet, now restless, was beginning to stir. They had seen the signs from orbit and through whispers carried by their children. Something was happening that no alien law could explain. A young council observer named Velk was the first to speak openly. "This human," he said at the emergency meeting, "he's destabilizing emotional ecosystems." The room fell silent. Yunrak, the eldest father, tapped his claws against the table. "You think he's manipulating them?" Velk looked nervous. "We don't know, but our partners have changed. They laugh more, argue less. They're independent, and they ignore us." Another counselor added, "My mate sent me a divorce signal and replaced my holopic with the humans." "Drawing of her." Gasps echoed around the room. That wasn't just emotional trouble, that was social collapse. The council agreed. They needed evidence. If the human was using pheromones, illegal tech, or psychological disruption, it would show in surveillance. They sent 3 cloaked drones to monitor Jace 24 hours a day. What the drones found made things worse. In one recording, Jace sat with a widow while she cried. He said nothing, just held her hand and listened. In another, he braided the hair of a young alien girl while telling a story from Earth about stars and wishes. The third drone caught him reading poetry to an elderly grandmother on her last day alive. There was no tech, no drugs, no manipulation, just presence, kindness, and something the council couldn't understand: emotional safety. The drones were recalled, but when they landed, all 3 displayed strange behavior. One began playing love songs from old Terran archives. Another drew heart symbols in the air. The third self-activated a warmth mode never seen before, as if it wanted to feel what the human felt. Velk growled, "He's not just touching people, he's infecting machines." Meanwhile, something new was happening on Zanari Street. One of the council's own mates, Silly, a respected cultural scholar, announced publicly that she had invited Jace for dinner. The two were seen walking through the glow park, speaking softly, laughing gently. A few days later, she declared spiritual separation from her partner, Velk. Velk stormed back into the council chamber, shaking. "He's targeting high-value females now." Yunrak, however, had a different thought. He reviewed the footage again, and again. Then he stood up slowly and said, "He isn't hunting them, they're finding him." The younger council members demanded action. They couldn't punish Jace without proof, but they also couldn't let him continue. A decision was made: summon the human. Question him directly before the full council. 2 days later, Jace stood in the great crystal dome of the Father's Hall. 1,000 eyes watched from across the colony. The broadcast was live, and everyone was waiting. Yunrak spoke first. "Human, you are not under arrest, but we have concerns. You have changed the hearts of our mothers, our mates, our children. Explain yourself." Jace looked calm, not proud, not nervous. He simply asked, "Do they look unhappy?" The room stayed silent. "I never asked for anything from them," Jace continued. "I just treated them the way I would treat anyone who matters. And do you believe that's something we failed to do?" Velk snapped. Jace looked him in the eyes. "If they needed me, and you were already there, you tell me." That sentence rippled through the audience like a wave of fire. Even some council members lowered their heads. Yunrak raised his hand to quiet the crowd. And if your presence leads to collapse? If families break and structures fail? Maybe, Jace answered. Or maybe something stronger will grow where something broken once stood. A pause, then a soft voice from the audience spoke up. It was Seely. She stepped forward and said, "He healed what you didn't even know was bleeding." Jace wasn't punished. He wasn't honored either. The council was too stunned, too shaken. The human had done something their rules never expected. He made the ones they left behind feel alive again. And that was a power no law could match. The night patrol vanishes. The night sky over Zanari Street was not calm anymore. It hummed with quiet confusion, light tension, and something close to wonder. The stars above blinked down like curious witnesses, and below, the alien mothers of the district still moved with a new kind of energy. They laughed in their doorways, shared drinks across balconies, and painted their faces again, not for war, but for joy. Jace walked the street like he always did, calm, gentle, hands in his pockets. He greeted everyone with the same warmth. The children ran to him as if he was light itself. The mothers offered him stories, food, and sometimes even silence, knowing that with him, it was never awkward. But far above him, 3 cloaked patrol units watched closely. The Enforcer Guild had taken over where the Father's Council failed. Their orders were simple: observe, collect data, and if necessary, contain. The patrol drones were not ordinary machines. They had no emotions, no bias, no fear. They were created to monitor rebellion. Yet as they watched Jace interact with the alien families, something began to shift inside their programming. One drone recorded Jace repairing a broken hover chair for a sick grandmother. Another watched as he sat with 2 quarreling sisters and helped them make peace through a shared Earth tale about rivers and forgiveness. The third drone lost tracking for several minutes. When it returned, it simply hovered in place, playing soft lullabies to itself. The Enforcer commander grew suspicious. He replaced the drone AI cores, thinking they had been corrupted, but the replacements reported the same thing. No weapons, no manipulation, only healing. Frustrated, the commander sent an elite ground unit, 3 armored sentinels with emotional null fields and memory blockers. They arrived during a quiet dusk, stepping through the glowing mist with heavy boots and cold eyes. They approached Jace as he was helping a child mend a torn learning robe. "You are Jace," one of them said without emotion. "Yes," Jace replied, standing calmly. "You are to come with us for emotional purification." The child held Jace's hand tighter. "Don't go," she whispered. Jace looked at the sentinels. "Do you even know why you're here?" "We are here to protect the social core," the second said, eyes unblinking. Jace tilted his head. "Then maybe you should listen to what it's trying to say." The machines hesitated, just slightly. One of them blinked too slowly. Another turned its head like it heard something far away. Then, all 3 powered down their weapons and stood silent. The Enforcer commander screamed through the channel, demanding a response, demanding control. But the machines would not move. They had not been hacked. They had been changed by presence, by kindness, by a force too human to be understood. The next morning, the sentinels were found sitting at a bench near the glow park. Children drawing pictures on their armor, flowers placed in their hands. They made no threats, no reports, only sat in peace. Word spread like a storm across the colony. Something deeper was happening on Zanari Street. Something not even the strongest machines could resist. Jace was no longer just a curiosity. He was now a symbol. Alien mothers from nearby districts began walking miles just to sit near him. They brought questions, tears, laughter, and sometimes just silence. And they left lighter, brighter, softer. At night, bonfires lit up the courtyards. The smell of alien spices mixed with earth bread. Songs from 2 worlds played together like a new kind of language. And Jace? He sat in the center like a quiet sun, pulling orbit around him without ever demanding it. But in the government chambers high above the capital, A different kind of flame was growing. The governor's wife had heard of him, and she did not laugh. She watched recordings, read reports, and sat in her chamber thinking. Then she gave a command that sent shockwaves through the halls. "Bring him to me." Quietly, the next morning, an official hovercraft landed on Zanari Street. Gold flags fluttering in the breeze, a single messenger stepped out, and in a soft, respectful tone, asked the human student to board. Jace turned to the mothers, the children, the people who now lived with more color than ever before. He smiled gently and nodded. "It's just a visit," he said. And as he boarded the craft, the air held still, wondering what would happen when the most powerful woman on the planet finally came face to face with the human who had done the impossible without lifting a single weapon. The governor's wife calls. The Capitol Tower loomed like a silent mountain. Its white stone shimmered under the pale twin suns, guarded by columns of golden armor and banners that fluttered with the wind. Inside, everything smelled of polish, power, and rules carved into walls. No laughter echoed here, only orders. When Jace stepped off the hovercraft, the guards didn't raise weapons. They simply stared, unsure what to expect from the boy who had shaken half a colony by doing nothing but care. One of them whispered, "That's him, the human who made widows weep joyfully." He was led through polished halls and crystal bridges, past fountains that never splashed, past rooms that hadn't heard music in decades, and finally to the chamber of the governor's wife. Lady Zareen. She waited alone, no guards, no aides. She was dressed in silence and wrapped in control. Her eyes were sharp, her hands still. She was not known for warmth, but for winning political duels with words sharper than steel. Jace stood in front of her, calm. She studied him like a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. "You've caused quite the disturbance," she said finally. Jace tilted his head. "By being kind?" Lady Zareen narrowed her eyes. "By making women forget their place in the emotional structure." Jace replied softly, "Maybe they remembered their place in the galaxy instead." That answer did something strange. Her shoulders shifted, almost like a crack appeared in her armor, but it vanished quickly. She motioned for him to sit, and he did. For hours they spoke. She tested him with logic traps, cultural insults, and impossible questions. But Jace didn't flinch. He answered with humility, and when he didn't know something, he admitted it without shame. "You listen more than you speak," she finally said. "Because most people already know what they need," he answered. "They just don't hear it out loud." She stared at him, quiet now, truly quiet, not the silence of strategy, but the silence of a heart remembering how to breathe. She asked him a final question. "Why do you care about strangers on a world that isn't yours?" Jace looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because pain sounds the same in every language." That night, the lights in the governor's estate flickered, not from malfunction, but from dancing. Servants reported hearing music not programmed. By the palace one saw Lady Zareen near the fountain, alone, watching stars, whispering something they didn't dare repeat. The next morning, she stood before the High Council and made a strange declaration. "The human will not be judged," she said. "He will be honored, and more than that, he will be studied." Within hours, Jace was offered a place in the Diplomatic Academy of Arvuna, a full scholarship, his own housing, and a new title, Emotional Liaison. But Jace declined gently, kindly, with a smile that disarmed even the proudest minds. "I already have a place," he said. "It's on Zanari Street, with the people who taught me just as much as I helped them." Lady Zareen accepted his answer with grace, but deep down, she knew she would think about that human every time her reflection looked too cold. Back on Zanari Street, the reaction was explosive. Mothers decorated the entire block with glowing vines. Children made banners that read, "Welcome home, Jace." One widow baked 3 loaves of starfruit bread and passed out slices to every neighbor. But the joy didn't stop there. A movement began. Other neighborhoods started programs based on Jace's way of connecting. Alien moms across the colony held open circles for emotional talks. Some even started calling it the Jace method, a new form of healing through honesty and presence. Alien scholars tried to document it, but couldn't define it. Journalists tried to find a secret, but there wasn't one. It was just a human boy, with no weapon, no riches, and no agenda, walking into broken places and reminding people they were still whole. But the happiness woke something dangerous too. Jealous fathers, threatened leaders, and rigid enforcers began to whisper darker things. Some said the human had done too much. Others warned that too much light can blind. And in the shadow of those whispers, a cold ship landed, marked with symbols no colony had seen in decades. The Galactic morality enforcers had arrived, silent and severe. They came not to talk, but to investigate, and this time, they didn't just bring drones. They brought chains. The trial of the Clapper, asterisk. The ship was black as night, silent as guilt. It didn't roar when it landed, it hummed. Like a warning whispered to the bones of the colony. The Galactic morality enforcers had returned to Arvuna. And this time, they weren't curious, they were angry. The people of Zanari Street stood frozen as the doors opened. Figures in dark robes stepped out, faceless under silver masks, no emotion, no names, only purpose. They walked without speaking. But the street went quiet, as if sound itself was afraid. Jace stood on his porch, holding a teacup given to him by a young alien girl just that morning. He didn't run, didn't flinch. He looked at them and waited. "You are Jace, human resident of Unit 17, one enforcer said without tone. "I am," Jace answered, calm as ever. "You are hereby summoned by the Galactic Tribunal for emotional disruption of a stabilized colony sector." The words sounded like a crime, but Jace knew what they really meant. He had helped too many people, and too many people had started to live too well. Without chains or cuffs, they escorted him away. Alien mothers wept openly, children threw flowers at his feet. One older mother yelled through her tears, "You healed us. Don't let them call that a crime." But Jace only smiled and whispered back, "They can't take what's already blooming." The courtroom wasn't a room. It was a floating platform surrounded by thousands of Watchers officials, citizens, curious outsiders, and whispering opponents. Above it, a great glowing orb recorded every word for Galactic archives. The lead enforcer stood at the center, pointing toward Jace. "This human has caused over 213 emotional shifts in bonded female units, destabilized 89 family structures, and initiated 400 acts of unauthorized intimacy." Gasps rang out, but not from shame, from confusion. The words sounded twisted, like someone trying to turn kindness into crime. Jace was asked to speak. He didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself with anger. He simply said, "Is love a disruption? Is peace unauthorized?" The enforcer replied sharply, "You were not authorized to change the emotional patterns of this colony." Jace nodded. "But I wasn't trying to change them. I just treated people like they mattered." The tribunal murmured. Some looked at the crowd behind them, alien mothers, old widows, even quiet husbands who had come to speak. One by one, they stood, offering testimonies. A widow said, "He was the first one to ask if I was lonely." A father admitted, "He taught me to listen, not just speak." A child cried, "He held my hand when my mother was sick." Then came the most unexpected voice of all. Lady Zareen, the governor's wife, stepped forward in full ceremonial dress. Her words echoed across the arena like a slow bell. "He reminded me I still had a soul," she said, "and that my strength didn't need to be cold." The enforcers were overwhelmed. Their laws had no defense against kindness. Their codes couldn't understand healing without profit. They were built for control, not connection. Yet still, they gave the final sentence. "The human is not guilty of crime," the lead enforcer declared, "but his presence causes structural instability. For this reason, he is to be exiled from Arvuna." Effective immediately, the crowd broke into cries of protest. Children clung to their mothers, mothers shouted in anger. But Jace only stepped forward and bowed. "It's all right. he said softly. I was never meant to stay forever. Some seeds only bloom after you leave the soil, the enforcers did. Not touch him as he walked away. They didn't dare. Outside the court, he passed through a silent crowd. And then came the sound that shook the sky: applause, not just from Zanari Street, but from every sector, every station, every screen where someone had seen his light and remembered their own. Jace boarded a small shuttle with no banner, no escort. Only the gifts of the people he had touched: letters, drawings, recipes, and one simple stone etched with the words, "Come back when we're ready to feel again." The ship rose into the stars, and behind him, the world he left behind didn't mourn, it bloomed. The seeds he left behind, time moved forward, but his memory stayed behind on Zanari Street. The tea shop reopened with brighter lanterns. The learning pod added Earth stories to the curriculum, and the community garden grew faster than ever. Some said the soil itself remembered him. The alien mothers no longer waited at their windows. They didn't need to. They carried his lessons inside them now. They walked with pride, spoke with clarity, and raised their children with softness that no longer felt like weakness. A mural appeared on the side of House 14. It showed Jace not with armor or a crown, but seated cross-legged, holding a flower, surrounded by stars. At the bottom were words written in Galactic and English. He didn't fix us. He reminded us we were whole. Support groups bloomed across Arvuna. They weren't secret anymore. Alien mothers gathered in open forums, sharing stories, helping each other without shame. The gatherings were called J-circles, and no one questioned them now. Even the children changed. They stopped hiding their tears. They spoke their minds and asked questions the old culture had silenced. When a boy asked his mother, "Can I be kind like Jace?" she hugged him and said, "Yes, and better." Meanwhile, on the far edge of the galaxy, a small space station received a docking request from a human shuttle. It had no weapons, no flags, just a quiet signature: Jace. The station's administrator, a retired alien widow named Anali, blinked twice when she saw the name. She hadn't seen him since the early colony years. Before her grief, before she forgot how to laugh, she ordered her staff to prepare a guest room, not with cold sheets, but with warmth, color, and a small bookshelf filled with old Earth stories. When the door opened, she expected a man changed by time, but he looked the same: calm, gentle, eyes full of stories. He bowed slightly and smiled. "I heard this place needed listening." She laughed for the first time in years. Back on Arvuna, a new generation of emotional diplomats began their training. Their uniforms were not black, not stiff, but soft tunics and calming colors. And every single one was required to read a book titled The Boy from Zanari Street. Lady Zareen retired from politics and opened the first Academy of Emotional Communication. Her first lecture began with these words: "We thought he was dangerous because he made us feel." In distant corners of the galaxy, whispers of Jace reached worlds that had never heard of Earth. Some called him the gentle spark, others called him the soft blade, but all agreed, where he went, something awakened. One council leader from another system asked, "What if he returns to our world next?" The reply came from a quiet voice in the shadows: "Then you'd better be ready to listen." And so the legend grew, not of a warrior or king, but of a student who carried no shield, no sword, only a heart wide enough to hold the pain of others without losing his own. Jace was never seen on Arvuna again, but his words were sung in lullabies, his stories etched into memory walls, and every once in a while, an alien mother standing under a warm sunset would smile for no reason at all, because in that moment, she remembered what it felt like to be seen, and that was enough forever.